Lesson 43, Interacting. In this lesson, we're going to talk about how to interact with the person running the macro. I mean, most of the time, you're creating macros that are just quick little macros for you to use, but sometimes you're creating macros so that way other people can run your reports while you're out of the office. And sometimes we need to interact with those people, either report a status or ask them questions. And we'll take a look at how to do that with the message box, the status bar, or an input box. So let's get started. All right, we're going to switch right over to Visual Basic here and talk about the various tools that we have when we want to interact with the person who's running the spreadsheet. So you've seen me use message box up to this point, and usually it's just a great way to report something at the end of a macro. So message box and the information that you want to report. So let's run this, and you see that we get a little Microsoft Excel. The report is done, and they click OK. All right, so this is good for reporting the status, but the message box is actually a little bit more powerful than this. The default value here is the prompt, but we can also specify a title, and that replaces Microsoft Excel with your message. So I'll show you this one. And because we specified a title, you see the title appears here, MrExcel.com, the report is done, and everything is good. It's also possible to specify a prompt, a title, and in the buttons parameter to say that we want either VB information or VB critical. And when we get that, we even add a little icon there. Hey, the report is done. So if you have something bad that happened, you could say VB critical. Let's try that real quick. We'll come in here and say VB critical. When we run that, all right, you get a slightly different beep you'll hear when you run it. And we get the report is done with the red X. So that would be like, oh no, something is horribly wrong. And so you have a little bit more control there. Another way that you can interact, and this is more of a way to interact during a long process. So let's say that we had a macro that was going to do a whole bunch of things. So for I equals 1 to 1,000. Cells I comma 20 dot value equals I, next I, and then we go do something else. That's going to take a reasonably long time. 1,000 to 5,000 equals I times I. Okay. If we want the person to see how that progress is coming, we can use the status bar. So application.statusbar is equal to, and we can put a message there. So my message might be I ampersand out of 1,000, and then down here out of 5,000. And I'll show you how that looks, but at the end you always want to make sure to reset the status bar back to false. That way it continues to operate as a status bar while the person is using Excel. So this is called status bar process. Come back here and run that, and I'll show you where it shows up. Click run. Right down here in the lower left hand corner we can watch that counter. Did you see it? Let's try it again. Status bar process. So down in the lower left hand corner it shows you the progress. If I have a report that's going to take like a minute or two to run, I'll at least put some messages down there that says, okay, now we're doing this, now we're doing this, now we're doing this, now we're doing this. And that way the person doesn't have to respond. They don't have to click OK to the message box. But at least if they're worried if the process is still working or not, they can look down there in the status bar and find out. So a couple of good ways to report information. Now, let's say we have to do the opposite. Let's say that we have to ask them something. So we have a question. Well, then instead of using message box, one way to go is to use the input box. Now, here I'm going to continue this line. So the line continuation is a space, an underscore, and then enter. Those two lines are now treated as one line, and you can see all of the parameters. Parameter 1 is prompt. It's a question. How many months should be included? And then parameter 2 is the title that goes up at the top of the box. And then you can specify a default. If most of the time they should be dealing with 3 months, you can specify that as the default, then they just have to click OK. So we'll try the ask something macro. Let me choose a cell here, and we'll run ask something. The box pops up. There's my title. There's my prompt. There's my default. I can click OK, and I get the answer. I can always override the default and type in 5, and we get that answer there. So if it's just a simple question, a great way to go is to use the input box command. Now, one other way to go when we're asking questions is to use the message box. You say, well, how can we use the message box? And it turns out that the buttons parameter is extremely flexible. I'm going to go back here to this table showing all the values in the buttons parameter. When we just do a message box, we're getting all of the choices that are associated with 0. So we're getting something called VB OK only, and the default button is button 1. That's when you press enter, and it is a modal form. The person must respond to the form before they can do anything else in Excel. But there's other choices here. If you would specify OK cancel, you actually get 2 buttons, one called OK and one called cancel, or yes no. You get a yes button and a no button. And then, boy, this reminds you of the days of DOS, doesn't it? Abort, retry, ignore, retry, cancel, yes no, cancel. And they're very clever at Microsoft the way that they built these in binary groups. So all of the buttons are down here in the low numbers from 1 through 5. And then the icon, either question, exclamation, information, or critical, are up in the 16, 32, 48, 64. And the way that this works is you're going to add 1, 2, 3, 4 different items from the different sections. So we can say that we want VB yes no plus VB exclamation, or VB yes no plus VB question. And oh, by the way, I want the second button, the no button, to be default. So we would say plus VB default button 2. And so that's going to add up the number 4, the number 32, the number 256, and it will understand that we want those 3 things. So let's take a look at the code here. Message box, because we're returning a value, it has to be in parentheses. Here's the prompt, color the cell red. Buttons, VB yes no, plus VB question, and then the title is MrExcel.com. If we wanted to make sure that the no button was the default, plus VB default button 2. All right. Of course, we need to specify a prompt here, and the colon equals. All right. And you're going to get an answer back. The answer that you're looking for is either VB yes or VB no. Of course, if you're looking for yes, no, cancel, you might get VB cancel. And so you could have if statements or select case statements that check to see what the answer was. Answer is just a variable. You could call this anything you want. Call it Fred, call it X, but a fast way to go. So let's try and run that macro. So ask something with message box. Color this cell red. There's our question icon. Yes, no. You see that no is the default button, and our title. So if your question manages to fit into something that can be answered with OK, OK cancel, yes, no, cancel, or the old DOS type answers, where you have retry, ignore, then you can get by very simply just by using the message box, and it will suffice. Now, in a couple of lessons, in lesson 45, we're going to talk about user forms. Now, user forms are the much more difficult way to go. You can ask a lot of different things with a user form, lots of different controls. These input box and message box are just the quick and dirty, hey, we just have to ask a question. We don't want to take the time of designing a user form, and a fast way to go. In the next lesson, in lesson 44, we're going to talk about 2 very special cases where we're trying to ask them to specify a file name, a path and file name. And rather than try and recreate the wheel, we can use a couple of built-in tools. I hope you found this lesson helpful, and thanks for watching.
Looking to advance your career by acquiring new skills? Tired of expensive off-site training programs? Wish you could learn from the best instructors in the industry? Look no further than live lessons. Self-paced, personal video instruction by the world's leading technology publishers. Each live lesson comes with a DVD featuring 3 to 4 hours of instructor-led classroom training, sample program code that allows you to work along with your personal instructor, and an example-rich study guide. Live lessons allow you to watch the entire course from start to finish, or navigate directly to any of the individual lessons. You'll literally watch over the shoulder of your instructor as he shows you how to build state-of-the-art applications. Live lessons, the power of the world's leading technology experts at your fingertips. To learn more, visit mylivelessons.com today.